All right, so let's do this. Okay, welcome to the Healthy Leader Inner Circle. Here we go beyond just telling you what to do and we dive into the how. How you can integrate healthy leadership into your life in a way that works for you, how you can create actions, whether we're talking about in your mind, in your emotions, or physically. And we do this through coaching, we do it through shared experiences, we do it through learning from one another, from your comments, from your willingness to raise your hand and come on screen. And the exciting part of all of this is that starting this year, we're also hearing from experts who have mastered leading from their upper brain, prioritizing well-being, living their best lives. And today, we have the super special star, Marco Pasqua. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate that. You're way too kind with that intro, but no, I so appreciate this. And Tracy, the second that you and I started chatting about a month ago, I knew that there was you're a kismet. It was kismet. You're a kindred spirit of
I
mine,
love
and
it.
we obviously see things in the similar way. So I can't wait to dive into this.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so that was not your quite your full introduction. Your introduction is that you guys listen to this, an award-winning entrepreneur, an accessibility advocate, a professional speaker with a very jam-packed schedule. So we're grateful to have you here. And he's also the creator of the Cube Principle, helping individuals navigate change, build resilience, and lead with purpose. Marco's been recognized for his work in leadership, accessibility, and community impact. He was just telling me about that. You can speak a little bit to our audience about that as well. And you are known for your insights in drumroll, energy management, mindset, and adaptability, right? And you've empowered
That's right.
leaders, people, everybody across the globe. So I want to officially welcome you, Marco, to our
Thank you,
call.
sir. I so appreciate it. And something that you may not be able to tell to those who've joined us easily is that I'm actually a person with a disability as well. So I use a manual wheelchair to get around on a regular basis. I was born with cerebral palsy, and so that impacts my ability to walk. And so I use a wheelchair to get myself around quicker. And I actually credit my disability with my ability to recognize and manage and adapt and innovate to situations because I've had to do that my whole life. So I think it was meant to be that I would eventually develop the cube principle.
Well, that's interesting. So, can you tell us? I left that part out because I really do. Will you tell our audience what cerebral palsy is and your journey
Sure.
and how you have gotten to this amazing place?
Yeah, appreciate that. So, cerebral palsy is a developmental disability, and it usually occurs at birth due to a lack of oxygen to the brain. So, believe it or not, it's actually brain damage. And depending on where the damage takes place, it can impact somebody in a variety of different ways. So, neurologically, it generally means that people with cerebral palsy have more tighter spastic muscles. For some individuals, it may affect their ability to speak. Other individuals, it may affect their ability to walk. Some people use crutches and canes, others use wheelchairs, others have to use communication devices. And so I somewhere fall, on the lighter end of the spectrum, I guess you could say, if you want to relate it that way, in that
Mhm.
it really impacts my ability to walk. So I'm not paralyzed in any way, but I do use a wheelchair to get around because I am able to move, but I have to use my arms to kind of shift my weight around as I move around. And so the wheelchair, a long time ago, I determined was the best way and the quickest way for me to get around. But
Mhm.
as I always tell people, it has primed me for a life of entrepreneurship in a way that I could never have imagined because people with disabilities and entrepreneurs have so much in common. You have to adapt on the fly. You have to take in situations as they come at you and do things a little bit differently and potentially even change people's mindsets about how you're doing things. And so it's that how that has been really, really powerful for me, but I haven't let my disability hold me back as I'm sure I'm going to be able to explain to you all in some examples as we go further in the conversation here.
Whew. I'm just like, I'm just going to sit back and listen to you.
Oh,
Th-
thanks, Tracy.
So I heard you just say, I am able to move. Now, you meant move around, right? But you are able to move.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, so I try to not just break down stigmas around people with disabilities. I try to completely shatter them. And so every single time I put myself in a situation, I grew up with a very athletic family. My dad was an athlete, a soccer player growing up, and what initially could be seen as something that was devastating to him, being an immigrant coming to Canada from Italy and learning that his firstborn son, only son, had a disability, he could have easily been shattered by that. But I said, "Don't worry, Dad, hold my beer," and basically, I instead of getting involved in soccer, I got involved in five sports: wheelchair basketball, horseback riding, swimming, weightlifting. And I competed on a national and international level in those sports to show my dad that it was up to me how I was going to define what a disability is. And so I continue to do that every day.
Yeah, right. So for those of you guys on the call here, one of the things that we do is recreate wellness protocols, right? We focus on fuel, rest, and move in order to manage your energy. So oftentimes we're like, hey, listen, I mean, I even did it this morning. I was like, oh, it's 5:30. Do I really want to get up? And honestly, you and I mean, I told you I've been like sucking down the information in your book, and you plus a couple of other people in my life, and also the people that I work with, inspire me to get up and keep going. So my question for you is, I know you've got the cube principle, and you use that in general, but can you tell me how do you keep getting up when you are not feeling it?
Yeah, well, so I don't know if this is too early in the conversation to talk to
You
you about the
go.
72-hour rule.
Go for it.
You know that that's the case. And so in my book, I talk about something called the 72-hour rule. And that is where, no matter how low and how low energy you feel or how dark your life may feel in that moment, I always say give it 72 hours. And why do I say give it 72 hours? Because I noticed there was a pattern in my life in that I would not necessarily have the solution to a problem that was right in front of me, but every time, 72 hours later, something would present itself where I was given the opportunity to take action and make a change with what was pulling me down. And it was always within 72 hours. It could be before, but it was never after. It was within 72 hours. And as my partner and I, as my wife and I were recognizing this, we were realizing that this was happening for us in every facet of our own life. And so in those moments where I'm feeling the lowest, I know that all I have to do is give myself sort of micro changes, micro actions where I'm actually helping to refuel myself. And it can be anything. So, it
Mm.
could be listening to your favorite music. It could be doing, transcendental meditation for you. It could be centering yourself around the people who build you up. But what you need to do is change the energy. Because if you're sitting stagnant in the energy in the same environment that has been bringing you down, you're going to get the same results. And so you have to be the one to disrupt that. You can't wait for someone else to do that. But I'm telling you that if you do that and when you do that, that's when the solution is going to present itself.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's you have a lot of energy. So it's no surprise that that's your, that you're talking about an energy principle. And I do want to get into it, but you also made me think of something else, which has to do with you're in Canada, I'm in the United States, and unless we live under a rock, we know that there's some interesting things going on in the political arena. And
Sure,
yeah, and so I have been working with, I mean, it's affected my family. I have people on, we'll just say both sides of the spectrum. We were talking about it at a
sure.
West Point Healthy Leader um, uh, coaching call that we did. So here's my question for you. For the people who are who know people who have lost jobs or are feeling very low about what's going on, what advice do you have to them in addition to the 72-hour principle? Because you said micro actions, right? And you referenced sitting stagnant. So what would you say to those people?
Yeah, so I would say that leaders, individuals in themselves, they often get stuck in reaction mode as opposed to action mode, right? So you're reacting to what's happening to you as opposed to taking the action. So I mean, really, you have to be able to shift that energy and kind of make that change. And so I always say to people, audit your energy drains versus your energy gains. So where do you spend the most time with your energy? And are you spending your time on the things that are draining you, or are you actively trying to move out of that and get those gains? And then create create intentional recovery moments. So as I said, small resets that prevent you from burning out. And leverage the things that do energize to you, right? So it's kind of
Hmm.
like your model there, Tracy. Emotions go to actions, actions equals results, right?
Yep.
And so I think like if you're leveraging the things that are kind of building you up, and in my book, it's there's an exercise called finding your hope compass in chapter 2. So it's all about finding the things that help to fuel your energy through hope, through the things that give you hope. So although there's a bunch of turmoil in the world right now, I actually don't really let all of that distract me, because I know that in the end, things are going to work out as they should. And maybe that's overly optimistic, but that's just the way that I choose to live. And so what I can do is construct things around my personal aura and my personal bubble, and not worry
Hmm.
about the things that are so far out of my sphere that I don't have the control over it. Because what we do create in our life is ripple effects. And so it may start off in our own personal circle, but that ripple grows bigger, bigger, bigger. Think about when you throw that stone into the water, and how that ripple carries outwards. So your small actions today is going to impact people's lives tomorrow. And I truly believe that. And I also want to take a quick second to explain to people what the heck is the Q principle, because most
Yeah, let's
people
do it.
are probably like, what is that? So
Yeah.
it's an acronym, creatively utilize your best energy. And actually, for me, it was actually born out of rejection, believe it or not. When I used to work in the video game industry, and during the 2008-2010 recession, I lost my job along with 1,500 other people who were working at the company that I was working at. And I went to go interview at some other game studios to get back into the game industry. And I kept hearing from hiring managers, I'm so sorry, Marco, you just have too much energy. We don't know how to do that. We deal with that. We don't know how to mold that. And I thought to
Right.
myself, initially I was actually horrified. I thought, this is terrible. I have too much energy. Like, what does that mean? How do I deal with that? But then I thought to
Dial it
myself,
back, right?
that's right. That's right. And so I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. Where are there, occupations where high energy, high capacity is a good thing? Firefighters, athletes, entrepreneurs. So instead of being told that it was a bad thing, it was more about meaningfully directing that energy in a way where I could use it to the positive. And so, yes, potentially I was giving out way too much, and it was coming across like extremely palpable into someone's face. Whereas if I can learn to dial that back, I can learn to control it, then I can control the outcome of how somebody receives that energy. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to: is we all have nervous energy, especially as leaders out there. We want to make a good impression on our team. We want to be seen as the
Mm.
alpha or the leader in our group. But we think that, having more energy means that we need more time. And that's absolutely not the case. What you actually need to do is be focused on where you're spending your energy, as opposed to feeling like you need more time to collect more of it. And the second that you do that and you dial yourself back, people will see that calm demeanor, they'll see how it's reflected in your body language, and they'll ultimately want to follow you as a leader as a result.
You sound like Marco that you're talking about the big click for me when I went from personal training and focusing on fitness was that okay, if somebody's taking care of themselves, they're learning discipline and focus and self-awareness and self-management and oh wait, that's self-leadership. Oh, and then if you know how to lead yourself, then of course you're going to lead others better. That's that ripple effect that you were talking about.
That's right. Yeah. And I often think to myself, leaders who really know how to manage their energy properly, they're going to be able to align their energy with the vision that they have. They can build resiliency and leverage those energy zones in a way that makes the most sense for them. That's kind of the way. And the thing is that people think that you have to do these big, grandiose things, but it's actually about breaking things down into smaller steps, so
Yep.
that you can feel like you can digest what is being there, as opposed to feeling like you have to do it all at once. If you think you have to be a jack of all trades as a leader, that's your first mistake. It's actually understanding how you can delegate your team members to do the things that you're not necessarily as passionate about, but maybe there's somebody in your team who is really passionate about it. So, for example, I'm not a numbers guy. That's why I have an amazing accountant. Okay.
Right.
But he loves numbers. He loves what he does. He loves finding solutions in ways that I can't. And so, really, by effectively utilizing him for his skill sets, that's what the Q principle is all about. Creatively utilize your best energy, but also the energy of others and the team members around you, because that's going to not only build you up, it's going to build them up, because that you are a mirror to them. So if you're being constantly reactive, always being pulled down, being bogged down, they're going to reflect that exact same emotion. So really take a step back, take stock in what it is you're doing and the conversations that you're having,
Mhm.
and allow people to bring solutions to you. Don't feel as though you have to be able to do everything yourself.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you were talking about those smaller steps, those micro actions. I know that I have in the Healthy Leader Inner Circle, we have one bonus material that's called um, size matters. and, and that means that, and basically it goes off of another model that we have, which is basically when you get to this point in the moment where you're thinking,
Mhm.
do I get up out of bed, right, and work out, or do I not? That is a point of power right there, where you make a decision with
Huge.
your upper brain or you don't. So I feel like what you're talking about is there's this potential to kinetic energy, right? Where you're
Yes.
showing up and those micro actions allow you to do that. So if we back up and it's not just a micro action like put my shoes out on the bed or set my alarm or have somebody holding me accountable. Um, how do you ahead of time? What are some of the things that you do mentally ahead of time that helps you go from potential to kinetic, right? It's like as you're bouncing down on the diving board until you go forward. What are some tricks that you might have for that?
Well, you may have heard of, visualization or theater of the mind.
Mhm.
And actually, if you're a former trainer, then you'll fully understand this. It's as silly as it sounds. It's about closing your eyes about any given situation you're about to go into, whether it's a difficult conversation with an employee, maybe somebody in your personal life, and actually close your eyes and imagine the scenario playing out in front of you in real time. And Nikola Tesla, who is an inventor that I very much look up to, I have a Tesla coil tattooed on my body, is how much I look up to Nikola
Oh my
Tesla,
goodness.
because he was an innovator that was, underappreciated. He would always do these theater of the mind exercises for his inventions and for his creations. Now, I can't do it to the level that he could. He could literally imagine replacing a cog with another cog and then
Hmm.
actually doing a real-time test of that machine in his mind and seeing how the parts would interact with each other. But the principles are the same. Take that moment, play it out in your mind, do a little bit of workshopping in your mind as to how it might go, and imagine
Hmm.
the different ways that that person will react to the things you're saying and how you might tweak the things that you're going to say back at them, and until you get to the best outcome. And so if I have a really big presentation coming up that I'm super nervous about, obviously positive affirmations in the mirror saying, you can do this, you got this, you're awesome, as silly as that sounds, if I believe that, that's going to be reflected in my body language and it's going to immediately calm myself down. But really, Tracy, taking that moment to take a step back and actually play out the scenario in your mind and how it could go. And if you play out actually the worst case scenario and you're able to come up with a solution, I think that's the best place to start, because at the end of the day, it's like
Mm.
ripping a band-aid. Instead of avoiding that, I think there's an author out there that says, eat that frog, which is,
Right.
take the
Eat the
most
frog.
difficult
Right.
act, eat the frog, do
Yep.
the most difficult thing first. So take the
Ooh,
most
I like
difficult
that.
thing that could potentially happen, do that first in your mind. And at the end of the day, no one is going to die as a result of whatever social interaction you're about to have happen.
Right.
So once you tell yourself that everything is going to be okay, no matter what happens, I look at it this way. As you read my book, you understand I'm obsessed with the passage of time and how it goes. And at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. And
Hmm.
no matter what big project that we have due or something that we have to get done by the end of the day, whether we're doing the actions or not, those 24 hours don't care about what we're doing. They're going to happen whether we like it or not. So if we don't show up, those hours are still going to tick by. So, what are you going to do to then take control of the reins and say to yourself, that's how I'm stepping into this? I'm going to step into it with this kind of attitude. I'm going to make sure that I'm compassionate towards the other person. I'm going to try
Mm.
to gain perspective out of the things that they're saying, even though I may not agree with them. And that is an effective leader, is somebody who can really say, you know what, if I can deal with the worst case scenario and I can absorb from that person maybe some lessons myself, maybe there's something for us both to gain.
There are so many things that you just packed into that. Like I'm just like writing down like this is so many things. But first, I just have to. I know that Rick is listening to this. He is my partner who plays golf, right? And I know that we have some golfers on here as well. And we have been doing part of being a healthy leader. We talked about the T cycle, how you're thinking, emotions,
Mm,
and then actions, and how. And we're not talking about traumatic brain injury or depression or anything that's been diagnosed. We're talking about the ability to think through and manage your emotions, which again is the focus for this month in our Healthy Leader Inner Circle. So when you are using your tools of self-leadership, it's mental, emotional, and physical. Those are the three energy paradigms that we basically are talking about. And that falls right in the middle of that X-tier model. So the interesting thing about Rick and the golf and what you were just saying is that the mental piece, and you were talking about imagining and thinking and the cog with Tesla, is that, and I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this, is that he goes to a particular golf course and he
yeah.
starts to bring his mind down and he's watching the way that he is golfing. And he realized that he was having difficulty on one particular shot. It was the third hole on this particular green, that when
Yeah.
he was watching it, that he no longer was watching it from his perspective, but then it was like from a camera. It was from a view out here. So he
Nice.
literally
Yes.
was right. I know. And that's very like now you're knowing how your mind works, right? And he was like, so
Yes.
I want to practice actually from my point of view, watching that ball go in. And I think when you have that type of cognitive ability, then for sure you can say, okay, what is it now? Let me witness that ball go into that hole because he hadn't ever
Yes.
made it, right? And then what does that feel like emotionally in your body, which
Right.
relates back to what you said. If I'm doing a positive affirmation in the mirror, if I believe it.
Yeah. If you don't believe it, then it's not going to happen, right? It's kind of why sugar pills or placebo pills work. Is somebody's being told in a blind study that this is the pill that's going to change your life. And there's been so many studies over the years, Tracy, where, for example, I read about a study once where there were people who were allergic to poison ivy. And there were leaves of poison ivy, and they were rubbing the poison ivy on people who were allergic. And the people who knew it was poison ivy were getting hives immediately. Now, they did a blind part of the study where they actually rubbed just everyday leaves that looked like poison ivy that didn't have it at
Yes.
all. And they told people, this is poison ivy. And immediately they were breaking out into hives. Now, they did the same thing in reverse and told people that this is not poison ivy. This is just a regular leaf to poison ivy. And almost 100% of the people participating didn't experience the hives when they believed that it wasn't poison ivy. So if that doesn't tell you that mind actually has power over the physical, I don't know what does, right?
I know. So here, okay, so since we're getting deep on this, we're getting to the deeper levels, is that okay, so if you're imagining, let's just use the golf analogy again, right? And you're imagining it and you've got it, and then you create that energy in your body. What would be for you a way for you to sustain it? I know you're talking about the 72 hours, but how do
Sure.
you, are there practices that you have to sustain that energy like throughout the day?
Yeah. Well, okay. So first and foremost, obviously, eating healthy really does help. I'm not just, saying, look at your food pyramid and whatnot, but obviously getting the right nutrients in your body. Now, this is not for everybody, but I've actually been doing intermittent fasting for about 3 years. And I
We love
found
it.
that intermittent fasting is huge for me. And the reason being is that I don't have the bog down of cereal or anything like that in my system in the morning as I'm trying to digest. I actually start my first meal around 1 or 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And the reason being is I noticed that I wasn't getting the same burnout. I wasn't getting the same bog down because your body naturally has the ability, as long as you're consuming enough water, by the way, so drink water,
Yeah.
your body has it in itself already to use the visceral fats in your body as energy sources. And in fact, those visceral fats actually have more energy stores than your typical breakfast that you're having carbs and things of this nature. So that
Right.
really helps out. Also, they say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So really take stock. Who are the people you're spending the most time
Mm.
with? Because you could have, and I'm not here to provide any sort of counseling or anything to anyone out there. So obviously take this with a grain of salt, but do take stock in the people that you're spending the most time with. If you have energy succubuses in your life who are only taking and not giving, that's not going to serve you well, right? And so I'm so grateful that every single day my wife and I have a debrief on the couch, and it could be literally over a glass of wine, and we just talk about the day. My wife and I,
Mm.
knock on wood, we've been together for 17 years. We've not had a single day of marriage counseling, because literally every day it's marriage counseling together about us talking about our actions, talking about our day. What's the things that we're most grateful for? I used to do a gratitude journal every day, but now I've kind of evolved to the state that I don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to do a gratitude journal. But
Yep.
my wife and I try to make a celebration every month. We'll actually buy a bottle of champagne, and we'll pop a bottle of champagne at the end of the month to celebrate the wins that we have. And just knowing that those things are going to take place, it could be just going out for a lovely lunch with your partner or a friend, giving yourself those wins, those moments where you're having back, it is going to sustain your energy over time. Getting enough sleep, which is difficult to say when I'm a dad of a 4-year-old daughter who gets up religiously early mornings, doesn't matter what, but knowing that I have to show up for my wife, I have to show up for my family, I have to show up for my friends, that really does fuel me, Tracy. And I'm sure it's the same for
Mm.
you.
It is. It is. It totally is. So it's interesting because you're talking about fuel, and I love that you use that. We talk about fuel, rest, and movement. From, we call it from, right? I told you I do everything in
Yeah.
three. So fuel, rest, and movement. And here's what I thought was interesting. You went right from fueling your body. And by the way, I love intermittent fasting, and I was shaking my head. Me too. I don't eat till much later on in the day. Have way more energy. I do
Mhm.
encourage my clients to do that as well. And you talked about fueling your nutrition, and then you said fueling with the people. Like, what are you taking
Mhm.
in? Not just fueling your body with your food, but what are you taking in to your body as well? Who are you taking in?
Yes, who are you taking in? And also, if you're letting in the wrong people, they could be taking energy out of you and you don't even realize it. It's like, oh man, every time I talk to that person, all they do is present me with their problems. And so what they're doing is they're projecting their issues onto me. And it's not that I don't want to be a helpful friend, but if
Right.
all you're doing is having pseudo therapy sessions every single time you talk to this person, as opposed to an energy exchange. So not just an energy take, but an energy exchange. And let's talk for a second about what you mentioned about the three, because I actually break the Q principle down in a similar way. So
Uh-huh.
the mental energy, that is the decision making and the problem solving. The
Yep.
emotional energy is where you're going to your passions, the things that build up your resiliency and your interpersonal interactions. And then the
Love.
physical energy is all about your stamina, your wellness, and your longevity in your leadership. And if
Mhm.
you combine all three, and you're doing that by reinforcing those things with, your micro actions, then that's where you're going to see the best results.
Yeah, yeah, and what you just described is it's the T cycle, and the other thing that you described is something that we use called the power of praxis with an X. And basically, that means that we're not just doing the physical action, but we're also doing the emotional and the thought. And you just went over multiple different ways that people can do that. That we're doing all three of those together, and that is like it's explosive. Like you are like, oh, how did I get out when you do all of that together, right?
Yeah, 100%. No, and that's the thing, is people think that mastering your own energy is like some, long-standing guru thing, but no, it actually is in the smaller bits, bit by bit, that you eventually become a master at doing this. Because what works for me, it may not work exactly the same for you, Tracy, but that's why you have to find for you what is in your energy toolbox. What are the things that
Yes.
actually build you up in order to do that? And I can't tell every one guest in this conversation what that looks like for you, but by reflecting on those things and doing the things that are building you up the most, you are going to see those best results.
Yeah, you are the expert of you.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
I'm gonna rewind here a little bit because I was gonna ask you about your hope exercise because when I went through that, I was like, okay, this is really cool. And I used to think that hope was a little bit of a dirty word, right? But then I was like, I've changed my mind on that. And the reason that I thought that is because if you're hoping, you're not doing. And that's not
Right.
true, right? So there you have I love all five of these steps that you give, but two that really stuck out to me was step number three, which is face the wall. Can you speak
Yes.
to that a little bit? I thought that was really intriguing.
Well, facing the wall is really coming up up onto a reflection of yourself, and the thing that is really creating as big of a bear. It's basically you're allowing an obstacle to be the thing that is preventing you from moving past that, right? So, own up to it, own up to the thing that is creating the biggest barrier for you, and say to yourself meticulously, how can I break this down? Right?
Mm,
How can I face that thing that seems immovable, that immovable object? And what can I do? How can I change what I'm doing in order to make that momentum to my advantage? Right. And for me, it is a lot of hope. It is a lot of putting faith into what it is that you're doing. But I think what it is, it's about owning up to it and not trying to avoid it, because we often try to suppress the things that we don't think are the positive reflections of ourselves. And as opposed to
mm-hmm,
just suppressing it, face that
mm-hmm,
wall. Really take a
mm-hmm.
look at it and dissect it a little bit deeper and say to yourself, what is the root cause of what is actually happening here? It may not
Right.
have anything to do with the particular action that you're trying to solve or the problem you're trying to solve in that moment. It could be something that is a lot more deep seated. And so ultimately, that is what I mean about facing the wall, is just
Mm-hmm.
owning up to it, understanding it, and then using it to your advantage.
Right. I love that. And I love where you went with that, is facing your own wall first, right? Because that's what we do here, right? We're talking about self-leadership and how are
Yeah.
we thinking and how are we emoting. So now, and before we started recording, we you said something that was really powerful, and it's something that I say all the time, and I'm a broken record. I say this to myself, and it's the X in the exterior model, which is the circumstances, the external circumstances.
Mm,
And so what about those walls, right? Whether we're talking about the political climate or the social climate, or that now we have many people have limited resources, or they don't have a job,
sure.
or they're trying really, really hard, but they have these, people, friends who are like, just have another drink, or whatever. What about those walls?
Yeah, so as I said to you prior to us going live, you know, people think that you have to be able to control the actions of everything else around you and other people around you, but you can't
Hmm.
necessarily control the actions of others, but you can control how you react to their actions.
Right.
So that's the most powerful thing too. No matter what the world is throwing at you, no matter what the people in your social circle are throwing at you, you can take pause, take a deep breath, and actually control the way that you're reacting to the things that are happening. And if you can do that, then that's going to really impact the way that the outcome presents itself.
Right.
Because people often think like, oh, all I have to do is convince this person to see things differently. All I have to do is this and this and this. That could be a hill that you're not willing to climb, or that has a tippy top that you just don't know where it is, and it's way up
Right.
there. But what you
Right.
but what you can control is ultimately your reaction to what's being received. And listen, we're all human beings. We all make mistakes. I'm not saying that I'm impervious to making mistakes. In fact, that is part of the human experience. But
Yeah.
it's, what can you learn from this? I always say there is no win and lose. There's only win and learn, because it's how you receive information that you can say to yourself, okay, I may have failed in the traditional sense in this circumstance, but what did I gain from that experience? Right? What
Right.
what what lessons was the universe trying to tell me? Because you'll notice things in your life will repeat over and over and over again
Right.
if you
Right.
don't learn the lessons that are in front of
Same
you. But
argument,
this,
same problem.
that's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Right. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if you
Right.
change the way that you're doing these things, and you actually say to yourself, okay, what's the real lesson here? I have found, Tracy, that when
Yes.
I actually reflect on what is the lesson, and then I try to internalize that, and I say to God or to whoever, whatever you want to say for
Yeah.
yourself, that you're
Yeah.
speaking it out, speaking your truth out to the universe. If you
Hmm.
say, I understand what this means, I'm going to change my actions now. I'm telling you, that lesson will slowly stop presenting itself until
Yes.
eventually it's phased itself completely out, and you're moved on to. If I were to relate it back to video games, it's you've now leveled up and you've moved on from that level. You've done that little mini game, and now you're able to move on to the next stage and get that trophy,
Oh,
whatever
I
the
love
case
it.
is.
I love
Yeah,
it. I love it. So here's what's interesting. I also am obsessed with time and the idea that the present moment only is the only thing that exists. And so we have the three W's, which is use the past to cultivate wisdom, right? What's the lesson? Like you
love it.
literally just said that. And then, okay, how do we design ourselves so that we can win in the future? And then here's the question, right? In this moment, when we are up against that wall, how can we be willing, and this is where we're talking about our mindset and our energy, how can we be willing to say, okay, I'm going to be present to this and choose to respond instead of react to it.
Yeah, I think people they ruminate on things and they get
Yes.
lost in their own mind, right? And so you can actually become your own anxious, nervous breakdown every single day.
Totally.
If you just ruminate in, oh, I could have done it this way, or, oh, I should solve it like this. But instead of getting stuck in the rumination, as you said, be present in the moment. Take a deep
Yes.
breath and know, like take observation, take stock in what's around you and what is actually happening, or what is the person actually saying to you. That makes me think of the first chapter of my book, which is how the future proves the past. You were talking about
Right.
how, and I truly don't believe that time is linear. So you'll learn in reading my book that there's a lot of the things from my past that
Yep.
actually impacted my future, and things that from my future that impacted my past. I just didn't know it yet. Right. And
Right.
it's all in the ways of not getting stuck in those cycles of rumination. And so
Yes.
that I think that was the biggest like learning lesson for me, is just I am a constant worrier and ruminator on things. But the second that I take a step back and was starting to take breaths and really charge myself up and regain the energy in a way that mattered, and providing positive solutions as opposed to being reactive and just being like, okay, this is the very first thing I thought of in my mind, that's what we're going to do. No, take a step back, realize what you actually need in order to overcome that hurdle, and then present that idea forward. And you may gain new insights from people around you who are doing things differently than you've always done them, because just because it's
Yeah.
always the way it's been done doesn't mean it's the right way to do things.
Right, right. And here's what's really important, I think, for people to hear. And I am underscoring, you've said this multiple times, and it is the ability to, and I generally do this, I say, take a step back, like literally, like my meditation place is right behind me. I have a timer set every hour on the hour. I turn and try to get centered. The ability to stop what you're doing in the moment and to take a step back, I feel like that is the most difficult thing for people to do. One, this is super entertaining out here. Two, I got to get stuff done. I got to get it done. And so to be able to separate yourself and to take that step back, either we're doing it physically, or if we notice that we're doing this entertainment in our head and playing with things, to be able to step back out of that, I think that that's like the meta master skill for us to be
Mm.
able to mentally, emotionally, and physically step back from things.
Oh, 100%. So I'll give you a perfect example that I often use in my presentations. There's an author by, I believe his name's Jeff Olson, and he wrote a book called The Slight Edge. And he writes about people who want to read, more in their life. And people say, well, I actually don't have time to read, even audiobooks. I just don't have a lot of time on my commute. But he talks about breaking things down into smaller chunks. And we talked about that at the beginning of our interview here. So he says in the book, you say that you can't read 365 pages of a book. It's just not going to take, you're not going to have the time to do that. But can you read 10 pages a day? So if you
Yes.
read 10 pages a day, after 365 days, that's 3,650 pages, and that's at least one or two dozen good books. So it's not about
Yes.
the big task of reading more books and then quantifying that with how many books you've read, but saying to yourself, what is the smaller task within that? Okay, can I read
Yes.
10 pages? Well, 10 pages is manageable. And the same thing, Tracy, when it came to writing my book. It's a huge thing to think to yourself, oh my
Mm.
goodness, I have this manifesto or this manuscript of everything that I want to put in here. How am I ever going to get to it? Well, just work at it piece by piece, chunk by chunk. Break it down into the smaller pieces of the larger goal, and you'll shock yourself at how quickly you can turn that around.
Again, like you're right. We are kindred spirits, right? So, literally, one of the things that I just added to my routine is I go downstairs in my basement. We do not have a finished basement, and we're eventually going to be moving, and it's a mess. So, I was like 10 minutes a day. Rick and I together, 30 minutes a week, twice a week. We have cleaned that thing up lickety split. 10 minutes a day after my workout. I'm like, what can I do in 10 minutes? A lot.
A lot,
A
yeah, a
lot.
lot, and it does shock you, right? Because we don't realize how much we drag our heels on things, and in that time
Totally.
where we were dragging our heels, we could have been getting things done, right? We
Yes.
could be getting things done.
Yes.
Like for example, one of the powerful books from like the late '90s, early 2000s was The Secret. But I think
Right.
what here's the thing about The Secret that made it so fluffy for some people is that it focused a lot on manifestation and vision boards without a key thing, which was action.
Action,
It was
right.
missing the action piece. So you
Right.
can't just have a Lamborghini on a vision board and look at it every day and say, I'm going to make that Lamborghini happen. My question to you is, what are you doing to acquire that Lamborghini? Right? You know what I
Right.
mean? So this is the thing, right? It's like don't get lost in all the things you need to do. Break it down, but you have to take action.
Mm,
If you don't move, if you're not the first person to move, that thing is not going to come closer to you. You have to be
right.
intentional in your actions in order to bring those things closer to you. And that can be anything, your love life, things you want to acquire, more money, whatever the case may be. Whatever your drivers are, you need to be taking the actions and doing so intentionally in order to see the results you're looking for.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I got to pause here. I'm gonna have to go to a couple of questions,
Sure.
and it's related to what we're talking about here. And Steve is talking about basically health, discipline, and consistency, right? And how can he maintain healthy habits while balancing travel, social events, and a full life, right? So, what do you say to that? And then I'm going to combine that also with Lori was asking about staying focused, right? With so many distractions competing for our attention, how do you train your mind to stay focused on what really matters? We kind of were already
Yeah.
talking about that, but in particular, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, first and foremost, I can totally relate to always being on the go because I travel a lot for my work and for speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of my speaking work, I'm an accessibility consultant. So my wife and I, we consult for businesses on how to make their spaces more accessible and inclusive. And so
Yeah.
I'm going into any environment under the sun, whether that's, sunny environments, whether that's piles of snow. And so I have to be able to react and adapt my body quickly. But even though you might not have time to fit in the gym per se and to manage your energy, do you have time for things that are going to recenter yourself? And I believe it or not, as a guy with a busy mind that's always going a mile a minute, I thought that it was impossible. But I found that doing meditations with mantras, so saying one particular thing and saying it out loud for myself so that I didn't have to
Mm,
worry about quieting the mind as much, because some people can do that. I
great.
can't do that. I can't
Yep.
quiet my mind as easily
Yep.
as somebody else.
Yep.
So saying that thing over and over again, that's going to make me feel centered and calm myself down. And also breathing exercises. Breathing is really, really
Breathing.
so I like to put on some binaural beats and some really like calming music. I actually find that orchestratic music actually is really good. I love Beethoven, things like this, and I think that there is something mathematical about that music that you don't get from other music today. That
Yes.
it's not about spoken word, because I can't do any creative work when I'm listening to words, music with lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
but music that is lo-fi, that is allowing me to focus. I can have that in my ears. I can take some deep breaths. I can say that mantra out loud, and that first of all calms me down. I can feel it in my heart rate immediately. And
Yes.
then you can do that anywhere, by the way. You can do that on a plane. You can do that in your hotel room. You can do that in
In a
wherever you
meeting,
are.
right.
Yeah, in a meeting, right? Give
Mm-hmm.
yourself the time that you need to do that, and that will
Mm-hmm.
help to recenter yourself. And again, if you need to snack or graze throughout the day because you are finding that you're a little bit low energy, that's fine too. Like I say, doing the intermittent fasting may not work for everybody,
Right.
but making sure that you have quick hits of whatever is going to work for you,
Mm-hmm.
it makes a big difference. Drinking a ton of water. I find that I'm super distracted. My wife will always jokingly say to me, "Hey, honey, if I'm ever kind of reacting in a way that you think is not the best of me, remind me to have a glass of water." And so she'll know when I look at her and say, "Hey,
Mm.
honey, how much water have you had today?" She knows that I'm not passive aggressive, but I'm
Right,
saying
right. It's your
maybe you need to refuel. Is that I would say to do that. So don't think that you have to have some sort of crazy workout goals and that you have to, do this many chin-ups when you're on the road or things like this, but do
Hmm.
whatever it is for you that calms you down. One of the biggest bonding exercises my dad and I used to do was watching 90s action flicks when I was a kid. And so, believe it or not, throwing on a movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme or Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger and reminding myself of my childhood and the ways that I would bond with my dad, actually,
Yeah.
even if it's a 20-minute clip or something, that actually makes me laugh. It makes me giggle and it totally recenters me in a way
Yeah.
that, is powerful. And now with all of our, cell phones and tablets on us, you can do that pretty much anywhere as well. So I
Yeah.
hope I give a number of strategies
Yeah,
there.
lots of
Um,
strategies there. And what I'll add to that, and I agree 100% with everything that you just said, and is that FitMind, I think, is a great app. I also love Insight Timer, and an Insight Timer is one that
mm,
we use when we're doing our meditations in the morning. And you can actually, and I think there's a binaural beat app as well, but you can
yep, there is. I
actually
have one on my phone.
yeah, right. So the cool thing that I like about Insight Timer is that you can listen if you want to somebody who's, going to talk about your energy or, kindness or compassion or forgiveness, if that's what you want to go
Hmm.
to. The other thing that I like about it is that there's a timer on there that you literally can say, I just want you to set a timer. And then you can have solfeggio frequencies in the background, depending on what you're trying to
Mm,
create. So, and it's free. So I love that. And then you said binaural beats. So I want to come back to the idea of getting fanatical about uh, people following through on their routines. And
mm,
I would say that if you're being fanatical about some of the things that we were just talking about, managing your mind and then
mm.
taking some small action, that I think that actually as we were talking about, builds on it. So it's not about being fanatical, like, okay, I'm going to do this huge thing all at once, but be fanatical about certain things. And this may sound a little bit harsh, but like to stop giving yourself an excuse, like it's a
That's
non-negotiable,
right.
right? That like quit making up excuses, like decide what you're going to be fanatical about. And maybe it is a 3-minute gratitude journal. Maybe it is
Sure.
just 5 minutes on the treadmill. Maybe it's just listening to binaural beats for 20 seconds, but find something and make a plan and be fanatical about that.
100%. And if somebody is uncomfortable with the word fanatical, you can reframe it to get specific. That's it.
Well,
Just get
fanatical
specific.
came from somebody who asked the question, right? They wanted to
That's
get
right.
fanatical, right? Yeah. But what were you
Oh,
going to
well, that's
say?
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. Fanatical is a word that is great that you can use for that, but get specific on the things that you want to
Get
do,
specific.
um, as opposed to, so broad that, again, then you're in that rumination cycle, right? Get specific on it, what it is that you want to do. Tackle that first. And then it could start out with a gratitude journal for 3 minutes, and it could move to 5 minutes of yoga. You can always switch it up because your body and your mind is going to get bored of doing the same thing over and over. So
Right.
if you find that switching it up actually helps to create that different result, find that perfect combination. Be a cook of your own energy, right?
Yay!
And find
Oh,
the
I love
things,
it.
find the ingredients that you're going to be able to put in and use to ultimately get the best result.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I have a couple questions here before we're finishing up, and one of them comes from somebody who's talking, and I should preface this by telling you that I asked people what they were struggling with, right? What's their biggest challenge right now? And you've covered
Sure.
some of it, and then someone just wrote overcoming self-doubt.
Mm. Just overcoming self-doubt. That is that's a hard one, and I'll be completely vulnerable with everyone. I had imposter syndrome for the longest time as a leader because I thought to myself, I'm just being me. How can that be something that people aspire towards just by me living my life? But as
Hmm.
you realize the impact, as I was getting more and more people on stage telling me, Marco, the things you've told me have inspired me is going to change my life. I even had one client tell me that as a result of the way that I was framing energy and the way that I was looking at life, that he was no longer contemplating suicide, which is something that I didn't even know was something that was happening. And so, that self doubt, I was believing like no one's going to want to follow this. But that's exactly in the beginning of my career. What was happening is like, I was shutting down my own ability to send out the most positive of energy out there. It's like I had to believe
Mm.
in myself first before anyone else could believe in me. That's it. And so although you might have moments of self-doubt, take pause in those little body language cues. the next time that you're with somebody in a social interaction and you know use your manners and you just say, you know, hey, thank you so much for helping to lift me up. Like tell them that. Be outright with it and watch their eyes light up and beam up.
Yes.
That is them receiving your positive statement and knowing that you actually have an impact on the rest of their day. You might have
Mm.
changed the way that they're going to see the rest of their day or even their life simply by being kind and remembering to be kind. And when I was stuck in that mindset of like, is this really doing something? Am I really having an impact on other people? I wasn't
Mhm.
seeing those results. But the second that I was seeing those aha moments happen for people in my audience, and I was realizing this is not about people wanting to come to my events to watch me fail. Nobody wants to see
Right,
me trip up
right.
on stage on what I'm going to say or what I want to do. Every
Right.
single person is showing up to that meeting that you have, to that birthday party, because they want to see you succeed. Nobody wants to
Absolutely.
go away from something and feel as though they didn't gain something from it. So just remember that every single interaction you have in your life is an opportunity to change someone else's life. And by doing so, you're not going to have that self-doubt anymore. You're going to realize that you have the ability to change so much, not only in your life, but in the lives of others.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. And it's interesting because we just came back kind of full circle to what you and I were talking about at the very beginning when we first got on. I said, "Hey, how are you doing?" You said, "You know what? I'm great. I'm really tired. I did this event, which I'd like for you to share with our listeners as well. But I definitely want to underscore really what you're talking about. You said you discussed cultivating belief in yourself, right? But then I
Yeah.
think the most powerful piece, at least for me, and is this cycle of energy, which you basically said is give your energy, give it to somebody, smile, give something to somebody when you are doubting yourself or feeling down. And then that almost like jump starts this energy, right? That's going from potential to kinetic. And now you're changing somebody else's life, possibly.
Yeah. Well, it's like Gary
Yep.
Vaynerchuk says, right? Give without expectation. If you go into any circumstance thinking that there has to be some transactional reaction or interaction, you're not gonna have something that's meaningful in your life, right? So oftentimes
Right.
I really like to give my energy without the expectation that, oh, it's because I'm gonna get something in return. But I can tell you that by doing that authentically, by focusing on creating authentic connections with the people and in the circumstances in my own life, people remember that. And that's where they want to return the favor without you even asking about it.
Right.
So to your point about why I said I was a little bit low energy before our conversation, it's because I was last night I was part of a telethon that I've been a co-host of for the past decade for Variety, the children's charity, and that's a charity near and dear to my heart because they're a charity that's provided equipment and finances for people to go through therapies and whatever they need in their life. And we raised over $2 million doing a traditional telethon
Woo!
on television last night. And it was really powerful because this is an organization that helped me from about the age of 3 till I was about 16, 17 years old. And I want to pay that forward. And I don't get paid to be a host on that show. I do it because I know it matters. And so that's sometimes what it is too. Don't always look at something as the almighty dollar. Remember that sometimes what we have to give in our energy is our time and our compassion and our energy in
Mm,
that way. And then you will get a return in that regard. And it is so it builds me up every single time. It's why I'm on the board of 2 national not-for-profit charities and all these types of things. Is that I don't just want to focus my life on the financial gains. I want to focus my life on the personal gains and what I'm able to
yeah.
really give back to my community. So if you're feeling like, oh man, all I'm ever doing is surrounding myself with people who are talking about money and how much money they can get, or oh man, it's been a tough economic situation for me. Take stock in the fact of what you do have. You might, again,
Mhm.
not for the moment be able to control your economic situation, but you can do more things like volunteer your time. You don't know who you're going to meet in those circles who are going to say, actually, I have this perfect job for you. I
Right.
know you weren't asking me for it, but I have this thing. Get yourself out there in ways where you're giving yourself without that expectation, and you'd be surprised at how much people will give back to you in return.
It's so cool. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's so great. I also have been told by many people to tune it down. Turn it down, Tracy. Turn down the volume. And it took me a long
Yeah.
time to realize, like, I'm not turning it down. Even when I was in the military, like, turn it down. I'm like, I'm not turning my energy down. So it is. inspiring, insightful, just wonderful, such an amazing gift to be around you. I am
Oh,
delighted
thank you.
and I know that somebody said great work today. I've got writer's cramp from all my notes. So well done and impactful.
Oh,
This is
thank you.
I do not want to end this, but it is our time. So before
It
we wrap
is.
up, I'd
Yeah.
love to ask you if there's one. I generally ask an actionable takeaway for our audience here. And remember that these are leaders who are really determined to live their best lives and who are in lots of difficult circumstances. What would be your actionable takeaway for them today?
Leadership is not about doing things more, it's about doing things smarter. Right?
Mm,
That's what it is. So you again try to put this laundry list together of all these things that you have to do in order to be seen as the optimal leader. Forget that. Throw all of that away, right? It's about being your authentic self. It's about being smarter at the way you're delegating things. It's about knowing the strengths of your team members and actually getting to know them in an authentic, meaningful way, right? You may not know this about your team members. Take that time to sit down with each and every one of them and ask them their why. Why
mm,
is it that they got involved in your organization? Why is it that they took a job supporting you in what it is they're doing? What can you do to help them excel to the next stage of what it is that they want to do? And you'll discover in that you'll have a lot of those smart moments where you can go, actually, wait, I've been totally underutilizing this person here that I could actually be putting in a role or position like this that would actually benefit
right,
everybody so much better. So
right.
take off the pressure. Don't think like you have
Mm,
to do more, more, more in the same 24 hours. Know that you have enough time in the day to make an impact, and it could be a world changing impact. You just have to
mm.
be smarter about how you are breaking these things down and doing those things. And I think that kind of almost summarizes our
It totally
conversation
does.
today,
Yeah.
Tracy. So yeah, and I hope that, and first of all, I also want to thank you before we wrap up in taking the time to read my book, to go through the exercises, all 9 exercises. Just for anyone who doesn't know, in my book, From Potential to Purpose, I have exercises after every single chapter that reflects on the theme of each chapter that you just read. And I do highly encourage you to take each chapter, do the exercises, write those things down.
Yes,
You
do
will be
them.
surprised once you start to actually write down what it is that you have in your energy toolbox and what you want to create for creating your hope compass and doing all of those things. It's a powerful thing, and it doesn't need to be seen as fluffy. It is tangible and it is action based, and I can
Right.
guarantee you will see results.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've gone through some of those exercises and they align with everything that we're talking about. I also wanted to, in one of these Zooms, I did put your link and I also will add it to the recording. So if anybody would like to donate to your charity,
To
that they can do
variety.
that. Yeah, to
Mhm.
Variety, variety.bc.ca, right?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
this is just, they do incredible things. They support individuals and most importantly, families and children with special needs and with disabilities in my province of British Columbia, here in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, where I have the pleasure of living. And also, I want to say to people, remember love, because with everything
Yes.
going on in the States, first and foremost, I can't quite understand Canadians booing the American national anthem at hockey games.
Yeah.
First and foremost, that has nothing to do with Americans as individuals.
Yes.
Okay, so no matter what is happening in the world, what we actually need to do is become stronger and actually more bound together.
Yes.
Americans and Canadians have had a long-standing partnership and relationship, and we're so much greater than just neighbors. We're friends. Many of us have dual citizenships. So to all my American friends who are listening into today's call, I love you
Yes.
guys. Please don't take a reflection of what you're seeing from some Canadians out there as a reflection of what Canadians are like and what we're doing. We got to really spread the love out there, right? Be the change we want
Yes.
to see in the world, as we've all heard. And
Yes.
and that's really what it comes down to. I have no ill will towards anybody, and I know that in the end, we're all going to be able to bridge the gap and come together.
Absolutely. And I think that that is a great way to tie it up because that's kind of where we started, right? And it really is about our energy. And so I wanted to just thank you so much for joining us and sharing
Thanks.
your expertise and your energy. And I know that our listeners are going to walk away with many actionable ideas. I mean, it's just chock-a-block full. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, real easy. So if they go to marcopasqua.com, so that's my first and last name.com, MarcoPasqua.com, you can learn a little bit more about what it is that I do, not only from a speaking perspective, but my work as an accessibility consultant.
Hmm.
I work all across North America and around the globe, and I would love to hear from you. Please don't be a stranger. I mean it when I say create authentic connections. Really do that. Don't collect people like Pokemon on LinkedIn. Actually do something with those connections. Make them meaningful, make them powerful. That's how Tracy and I got to meet.
Yes.
It was actually through my publisher, through my book, and she wanted to vet the publisher and make sure everything was hunky dory. And here we are today, off of that one interaction of us connecting on LinkedIn, and you being purposeful in the message that you sent me. It was not just a boilerplate using
Yeah.
AI message that you spat at me. You really said, like, I want to have a real honest conversation with you. And then we just realized there were so many pieces of alignment there. So I encourage everyone to
Yes.
do that in all of their social interactions.
Yes, yes, yes. And to everyone listening here, I just dropped his link in the chat, and we
Yeah.
will also advertise it as well. And I wanted to say, everybody, thank you all for being here. If today's conversation resonated with you, and I don't know how it could not have, and if you want to explore executive wellness coaching and leadership coaching, know that the work here always begins with self leadership, with strengthening your mind and your emotion and your physical muscles so that you can lead yourself and so that you can lead others much better. So there's lots of ways to do that from the Healthy Leader Inner Circle in these conversations. And we also do private coaching and leadership as well. So in the meantime, remember, leadership starts with self-leadership. And when you lead yourself with clarity, compassion, and courage, others will follow. So thanks again, everyone. Create a great day.
All right. Bye, everybody.